Mr. President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. I now hand over to the prosecution to continue his line of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Where we left off, you had just made reference to the fact that you had traveled part of the way to Phnom Penh by boat. Can you tell us what part of the trip you traveled by boat, from where to where?
Response: I took the boat from Kratie province all the way down to Phnom Penh.
So do I understand correctly that you drove from Mondulkiri to Kratie and then took the boat from Kratie to Phnom Penh? Is that correct?
Response: that is correct. I drove from Mondulkiri province to Kratie province, Ratnakiri rather, to Kratie province, and from Kratie I took the boat to Phnom Penh.
Thank you. When you arrived in Phnom Penh for this meeting, can you tell us how long you were in Phnom Penh before you returned, left to go back to Mondulkiri?
Response: I stayed here for I attended the session for 3 days, and then I stayed another night after the meeting before I returned to Mondulkiri.
Where did you stay in Phnom Penh when you were here for that meeting?
Response: I stayed in a place on the riverfront.
Can you be more specific as to where on the riverfront this place was? For example, where in relation to the royal palace?
Response: it was right on the river bank where the river crossed.
And before we start to talk about the meeting, let me ask you one more question. When you traveled back to Mondulkiri, did you travel back the same way? That is, by boat to Kratie and then by car from Kratie to Mondulkiri?
Response: yes, I went back by the same means. I took the boat from Phnom Penh back to Kratie, and from Kratie I took the car.
And on either trip, either when you came to Phnom Penh or when you returned to Mondulkiri, did you see people in the country moving around at that time?
But
Response: No, I didn't see them.
When you traveled on the roads, were those roads empty?
but
Response: Well, from Karachi province to Mandolkiri province were basically in the jungle, and there were no people on the streets, on the roads.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Let me now go back to some questions about the meeting in Phnom Penh. I had read to you already a statement you gave in which you said that the meeting took place, quote, about 10 days after the 17 April 1975. And I wanted to ask you what you meant by 10 days. Did you mean that this meeting was approximately 40 days after the 17th of April?
but
Response: It was about 10 days, because I said it was about 10 days or so because I was not quite sure. It could have been 10 days or 12 days or so. It was around 10 days.
How many people in total were in attendance at this meeting?
Response: I do not know the exact numbers, but there were huge number of people from all across the country.
Were there representatives there from every region of the country? Do I understand you correctly?
Response: Yes, all people representative from the sectors were present at that meeting. But as for representative from the zones, I did not know because I didn't know them.
Do you know whether there were representatives from the military organizations who were in attendance at this meeting?
but me
Response: Yes. There were military representatives representing divisions and also those from the sector.
Now, can you tell us who the speakers were at this meeting?
but
Response: I saw Pol Pot, who was the presenter at the time.
Who, in addition to Pol Pot, made presentations at this meeting?
I'd go there.
Response: I did not see other presenters, I only saw just him.
Mr. President, I would like again to read to the witness and present on the screen an excerpt from the same interview, E3/367, and this excerpt comes from Khmer ERN 00251-437, English ERN 278694, and Khmer ERN 00251-437.
President, yes, you may proceed, but you are reminded that this document and the EN number on that particular page has been questioned already. Please do not repeat the same question, otherwise you will not be allowed to ask repetitive questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The statement in this interview, Mr. Witness, in the discussion of this meeting, you said the following, quote, "In that meeting, the presenters at the opening sessions were Noon Chea and Pol Pot." Is it correct that both Noon Chea and Pol Pot made presentations at this meeting?
But
Response, yes, that is correct.
Now, you've said that you were present for 3 days. Can you tell us how long the meeting lasted each of those days?
Response. It started from 7 a.m. after the breakfast, and then it stopped for a lunch break at 11.
Did the meeting resume in the afternoon? And if so, can you tell us how late it went until?
Response. The afternoon session started from 2 p.m. and it lasted at 5 p.m.
And was it Pol Pot and Noon Chea who made presentations the entire day, each day of that conference? Or were there other presenters in addition to them?
Response. No.
What did you understand the purpose of this meeting to be, Mr. Witness?
but
Response. I did not clearly understand the purpose of the meeting. What I understood was that we liberated the country and we have to lead the people to do rice farming for them to get rid of famine or starvation, and that their daily living condition improves and that they have sufficient housing to stay in.
Well, when you were asked by Lang to go to Phnom Penh for this meeting, were you told why you were going to Phnom Penh?
Response. After the liberation of 17 April 1975, I was asked to attend a meeting to understand the political situations after the liberation.
Can you describe for the Chamber the subjects that were discussed by Pol Pot and Noon Chea during the 3 days that you were present at this conference?
Response. I could not fully grasp whatever I understood. I already said it.
I understand, Mr. Witness, you've previously testified about that, but before I reference your statement again, I'd like you, to the best of your recollection, to tell the judges what were the general subjects that were discussed by Pol Pot and Noon Chea during this 3-day conference.
Response. As I understood clearly, it was about the building of the country. He repeatedly focused on this point.
Mr. President, I'd like to read another excerpt from the same document, E3/367, same ERN pages as before, but this is a different excerpt from that document.
President, yes, you may proceed.
Mr. Witness, in your statement to the investigating judges talking about this meeting, you made the following statement, quote, "Both of them talked about political matters, cooperative organization, currency prohibition, market and monastery closings, and stated that they would be reopened in the future." Is that a correct statement of subject matters that were discussed by Pol Pot and Noon Chea during this 3-day conference?
Response. Yes, that is correct. Yes, they talk about the closing of the market and that in the future the markets would be reopened. That what was spoken of by them.
Did they also talk at this meeting about getting rid of all the Vietnamese people from Cambodia, about having them moved out of the country?
President, Mr. Witness, please do not yet respond to the question. Awaiting the decision by the chairman regarding the objection that will be raised by the defense counsel. Defense counsel, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. I realize the gentleman has some challenges in his memory, but I think that asking leading questions are improper, and this is clearly a leading question. Now, if there's something in the statement that he wishes to direct the witness, that's fine. In my opinion, since the gentleman does not recall a whole lot today, but gave a statement already and has already indicated that when he gave the statement, it was truthful and accurate and complete, I believe, given that answer, we could save a lot of time if the gentleman were to go straight to the statement. If it is not in the statement, then I do object strongly to the witness being led in this fashion. Thank you.
Mr. President, I would not ask a question like this if it was not in the statement. I'm at your disposal here, of course, but the procedure I've been following is to ask the question first, give the witness an answer, chance to answer, and then go to the witness statement after that. And that is the reason that rather than immediately quoting to him his statement on this issue, I gave him a chance. I wanted to give him a chance to answer first. That's the procedure that we've been trying to follow. So that's my response to counsel's objection.
The President, having heard the objection and the response by the parties, the objection is not sustained. However, the prosecution is reminded that if the content of the question that he responded to have already been acknowledged by him, the prosecution should not raise that same question again in the same written record of interview. If you have other complementary questions, then you may proceed. You may proceed again, but it's better for you to repeat the last question so that the witness can recall and respond accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question, my question, Mr. Witness, is do you remember whether Pol Pot and Noon Chea at this 3-day conference talked about getting rid of all the Vietnamese, having them evacuated from the country?
The President, Mr. Witness, please respond to the question. the defense counsel, this matter has already been ruled by the chamber, so you are not allowed to make your objection again. If you were to make your objection, you should make it before the chamber's ruling on the same matter. And after the ruling by the chamber, you cannot raise the objection to that matter again.
Mr. President,
អត់ស្អីឆ្លើយ
Mr. Witness, please respond to the questions, defense counsel. You have to wait. Now it is time for the witness to respond. The matter or the objection has been raised by Counsel Michael Canavas already, and you should have done your objection at that time, not now. Please be seated. Response. As I stated earlier, and as I already reported to the judges, and I don't know what I should say because I said everything to the judges. Why I am now again asked the same questions? Please refer to my statement that I made before the co-investigating judges.
Before I do that, Mr. Witness, we need to ask you these questions in court first. So I would like you to tell the judges whether you remember the subject of the Vietnamese being discussed by Pol Pot or Nuon Chea at this meeting. Do you remember that?
Response. No, I did not hear them talking about the Vietnamese matter. That was the affair of the upper echelon.
Mr. President, at this time, we'd like to read an excerpt from a different interview of this witness, which is E3/384 at ERN Khmer 00345-906, English ERN 00348-375, and French ERN 00354-239. If I may ask, submit that to the witness and present it on the screen.
The President, yes, you may proceed. Court officer, please deliver the document from the prosecution for the witness. Let's see whether the witness can read it, as he has poor eyesight and he even claimed that he cannot even see the red light on the microphone.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I may have misspoke, or there may have been a translation. I meant simply to read, as we've been doing, read the document to the witness, not actually give him a hard copy. If that got translated, if I misspoke, that my intention is to do what we've been doing, which is just read to this witness, unless you would like us to submit a hard copy to see if he can read.
The President, you may do so, the prosecutor. You can pose your question to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. In your interviews with the investigating judges, you were asked the following question, quote, question, did they talk about driving all of the won from Cambodia? Answer, that was said, and the speaker was Pol Pot. Later on, I heard my lower-level cadres say that trucks transported the Vietnamese from the provinces of Kampong Cham and Krachi back to their country. Can you confirm that this is a truthful statement, Mr. Witness?
The President. Witness, please hold on. Defense Counsel for Noon Chi, you may proceed.
Mr. President, thank you. This is exactly the point that I wanted to make a comment about earlier. There's nothing in this interview that indicates that this statement had been made during that particular meeting in 1975 in Phnom Penh. So that's why I wanted to object earlier when this question was asked related to that particular meeting. That made it a leading question, and that made the objection of my colleague a valid one. I could not make that objection earlier because I was only responding to what the prosecutor was responding to the objection of Mr. Carneva. So if you had allowed me to make this objection earlier, we might not have had this problem. But I, again, think that it should be clear that nothing in this particular document, the E3/384, indicates that we're talking about the meeting in Phnom Penh. That was the basis of my earlier objection that I tried to make.
If I may respond, Mr. President, that is incorrect. I did not read the prior question because it involves a different subject that I want to ask him about later. But in the immediate question prior to this, the witness is referred to his prior testimony with a specific ERN page in Khmer 00251-437, which is where the discussion of this meeting took place. So it is counsel's incorrect that the record does not show that this was a discussion about that same meeting.
The President, the objection raised by the International Defense Council for Noon Chi is not sustained. The Chamber needs to hear the response by the witness to the last questions by the prosecution. Mr. Witness, please respond to the question if you still can recall the last question that was put to you. Response. I cannot recollect all the statements that I have made. President, the prosecutor, could you repeat your last question? Maybe he cannot recall it.
Thank you, Mr. President. The testimony that you provided to the investigating judges that I'd like to ask you about is as follows. Question. Did they talk about driving all of the won from Cambodia? And the answer that you gave to the investigating judges was, quote, that was said, and the speaker was Pol Pot. Later on, I heard my lower-level cadres say that trucks transported the Vietnamese from the provinces of Kampong Cham and Krachi back to their country. Was this statement that you provided to the investigating judges truthful, Mr. Witness?
Response. Yes, I did say that. That's what I heard at the time, that the Vietnamese were sent back to their country.
And who was it that described to you the Vietnamese being transported by trucks from Kampong Cham and Karachi? Who was it that told you about that?
Response: I cannot recall that, but I heard people talking about that. It could be those who transported the material to Phnom Penh, and those people said Vietnamese were loaded into trucks and they were sent back to their country.
Can you tell us whether any of the Vietnamese who were transported back to their country by truck, whether they were transported through Mondulkiri?
Response: No, I did not see any.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. We'll come back and talk about the issue of the Vietnamese a little more later. I'd now like to go back to the question about the general subjects that were discussed at the 3-day meeting with Pol Pot and Noon Chea in Phnom Penh. And you've mentioned we've identified a number of subjects already. I'm going to ask you some specific questions about each of those subjects. But before I do that, I have a few other general questions. Do you remember whether Pol Pot or Noon Chea talked about enemies of the party at this 3-day meeting?
Response: No, I did not hear it.
Do you recall, was there any discussion about plans to build irrigation dams and canals throughout the country? Was that a subject that was discussed?
Response: Yes, I heard about that the irrigation systems, the canals had to be built at provinces so that it's going to resolve the water issue for people to do their rice farming, to have sufficient water in order to resolve the livelihood of those people.
Do you remember who it was that talked about the subject of building dams and canals?
Response: It was Pol Pot who focused about the building of canals and dams.
And when you returned to Mondulkiri after this meeting in Phnom Penh, did the Mondulkiri sector engage or begin the construction of dams and canals in your sector?
Response: Yes. There was construction of dam building and canal for rice farming. It was both for dry rice farming and for rainy season rice farming, so that we would have sufficient water to resolve the livelihood issues of the people.
បាទសូមអរ
Who was responsible for making the plans as to which dams and canals would be built and how long it would take to build them? Who was responsible for making those plans?
Response. It was the plan by the sector. The sector would map out the arable land areas in the district, and then they would propose a plan in order to build irrigation dams or canals or others.
And when you say that the sector would propose a plan, who would that plan be proposed to?
Response. They propose a plan, and in preparing such proposal they would convene the members from the communes committee and the district committees. So it was not the sole decision of anyone. So it was a collective decision for the development plan in the sector.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Was there any discussion at the 3-day meeting with Pol Pot and Nuon Chea about the division of population into different groups, such as full rights citizens, candidate citizens, and depositees? Do you recall any discussion of that subject?
Response. In Mandalkiri province, there was no division of population, and there was no full rights people or depository or so, but there were only citizens in the province.
I'd now like to ask you a little more detail about some of the subject matters that you've mentioned were discussed at this 3-day meeting. And the first one is the issue of the closing of monasteries or pagodas. Can you tell the Chamber in more detail what it was that Nuon Chea or Pol Pot said about the closing of pagodas at this 3-day conference?
Response. I am not sure about this matter, and I only heard that they would close this and that, but it was the decision of people at the upper level.
Were the cadres who were present at this meeting instructed that they were to close any pagodas in the region?
Response. No, I never heard of that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the religions that were commonly practiced in Mondulkiri region prior to the Khmer Rouge taking control on the 17th of April 1975? What religions were practiced in Mondulkiri?
Bad.
Response. The ethnic minorities in Mandalkiri province believed in their respective traditional belief. Some of them believe in Buddhism as well, but others believe in spirits. And it was very important for the ethnic minorities to perform certain tribal ritual, and they believe in the ancestor spirit.
Were the ethnic minorities in Mondulkiri allowed to continue practicing their religion and doing these traditional rituals during the period of democratic Kampuchea?
Bad.
Response. There was no prohibition. Those ethnic minorities could perform their religious belief, but they must not organize bigger events or so. And of course, at that time, people were told not to be wasteful because they had to put more effort on doing farming rather than performing certain religious belief.
Can you tell us approximately what percentage of the population in Mondulkiri were Buddhists and what percentage were animists who believed in the traditional spirits that you described?
Bad.
Response. The tribal people, as a customary practice, considered animism as their primary belief. After the harvest season, they would, for example, sacrifice animals or so in order to offer to the spirit. But some of them also believed in Buddhism. In Mandalkiri province, before there were no pagodas at all. It was a very remote and mountainous province, so we did not have pagodas. But then when Mandalkiri province administration was established, then there were some pagodas for people to follow.
Thank you. And could you tell us what year it was that the province was established and that pagodas were first built in Mondulkiri? When was it that there were pagodas in Mondulkiri, Mr. Witness?
Mad.
Response. They established Mandalkiri province in 1963, and when that province was established, then pagodas were also built, and the first one was in Chimiet district.
And by the time of April 1975, were there pagodas throughout Mondulkiri province?
Response. Before 1975, well, in 1963, there was a pagoda, Mandolkiri pagoda, and there was also pagoda in Chimiet commune in other district as well. Actually, there were only 3 pagodas in 1963.
Do you mean that there were only 3 pagodas in 1975? Did I understand you correctly?
Response: there were only 3 pagodas.
And after the 17th of April 1975, were people in Mondulkiri allowed to practice Buddhism at those 3 pagodas?
Response: no, they were not allowed to practice it, because from April 1925 in Mandolkiri province, pagoda were closed, and even the Mandolkiri province itself were heavily bombarded, and houses and pagoda were all destroyed by aerial bombardments. Even the pagoda I used to know in Chimiet commune was also destroyed by aerial bombing.
Who made the decision that the pagodas in Mondulkiri province would be closed and that people could not practice Buddhism there after the 17th of April 1975?
Response: there was no particular person who decided the closure of pagodas, but in Mandolkiri province back then there was aerial bombardment by the Americans, so pagoda were destroyed. And in 1975 there were no people living in that province either, because the houses were destroyed.
A few minutes ago you mentioned a traditional practice of animists, that they would sacrifice animals as offerings to the spirits after harvests. Can you tell me whether the people, the ethnic tribes in Mondulkiri, were allowed to do that practice after the 17th of April 1975?
Response: they were of course allowed to do it, but it was reduced in terms of the scale of the function, because people were told to be economical, since it was in time of difficulty, so they had to save. For example, if they had to sacrifice more buffaloes or oxes or so, they would reduce the numbers of buffaloes to be sacrificed.
Who was it that told the people that they should be economical?
Response: the leaders in the districts or communes, they told the people to be economical. It does not mean that they told them not to do it at all, but to reduce the number of buffalo or oxes to be sacrificed. They had to be economical in order to ensure that they have sufficient stuff to eat.
Were there monks who lived in Mondulkiri province as of April 1975?
Response: no, there were no monks. As I said earlier on, that there was carpet bombardment in the area, so both monks and citizens would flee their community houses, whether they be wooden houses or brick houses, were all destroyed.
When was it that the monks had fled Mondulkiri province?
Bad.
Response: immediately when the country was liberated, and there were bombardments, so people and monks alike fled their community, and the aerial bombardment was so heavy that people could not remain in their village.
What year are you talking about, Mr. Witness?
Bad.
Response: now, the liberation of Mondulkiri was from 1970, and from 1970 onwards there were bombardments. So almost every day 2 aircraft would hang over the province, and they would drop bombs on the community. So all the people had to flee their home village.
Just so we're clear, my understanding is you're telling us that the monks began to flee Mondulkiri in the 1970s when bombings began. Is that correct?
Bad.
Response: yes, that is correct. As I said earlier.
And is it your testimony, Mr. Witness, that by the 17th of April 1975 there were no monks in Mondulkiri province?
Bad.
Response: yes, that is correct. There were no monks. Because all had to flee at that time, and pagodas were destroyed. Pagoda in Chimiet was completely destroyed, and all monks had to flee for their life.
Did anyone in Mondulkiri province try to build new pagodas during the democratic Kampuchea regime?
Bad.
Response: no, they didn't.
Why not?
The President: Witness, please hold on. There is an objection by the defense counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari. Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, I don't see anything in the closing order concerning the inability or the refusal to allow the building of pagodas. That's number one. Number two, we're asking this witness to speculate. How would he possibly know? Unless there's a series of questions that would lay a foundation that he would be in a position to know if any decisions were made and so on and so forth, fine. But the way the question is posed, it's leading. And he's asking the witness to speculate.
I don't know. This question cannot be leading. I asked the question. The witness testified that no pagodas were built, and I asked him why. The question why cannot be considered a leading question.
The President. Objection by the International Defense Counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari is not sustained. The witness is now directed to respond to the question posed by the prosecution, and you should respond to the question if you can still recall the last question posed.
But
Response. I actually have given my answer to such question, and if you still have that statement, you should read it out for me, then I will confirm or deconfirm the statement. The President intervenes. Mr. Witness, the statement you made during the interview with the investigator of the Office of Investigating Judges was a separate matter, and now you are being heard in public, so you should respond to the question, and your testimony will be the basis for the decision of the chamber, so you are advised to respond to the question by all parties. If you rely on the statement you made before the Office of Co-Investigating Judges, then there would be no need to ask you to appear before us again. Again, you are advised to respond to the question only when the question is deemed inappropriate, then the chamber will not allow that question to be asked. But other than that, you are advised to respond to all questions put by the parties or member of the bench. Secondly, I am of the opinion that you might have forgotten the question posed by the prosecution, so I would now suggest that the prosecution repeat the last question so that the witness can respond to it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, you have told us that the pagodas in Mondulkiri were destroyed during the war. I've asked you, and you said that there were no pagodas rebuilt during the period of democratic Kampuchea. And my question now is why? Why was there no effort made to build any pagodas during the period of democratic Kampuchea?
A response. That I did not know because it was under the responsibility of people at the sector level. It was their decision whether or not any pagoda or public infrastructure was to be built.
Mr. Witness, did you work at the sector level during part of the Democratic Kampuchea regime?
Response: Yes, I was a member of the sector committee.
And can you tell us whether there was ever any discussion by the sector committee about rebuilding pagodas in Mondulkiri region?
Response: No, there was no discussion or decision from the sector level about that, and there was no specific plan proposed either.
Based on the meeting that you had attended, the 3-day meeting you attended, at which Pol Pot and Nuon Chea had spoken, did you have any understanding as to whether Mondulkiri sector would have been allowed to rebuild pagodas during the Democratic Kampuchea period? Is that something you would have been allowed to do?
Mark.
Response: That I do not understand, because if the decision had to be made, it would be up to people at the higher level.
Mr. President, I was about to turn now to a different subject. I can continue, proceed to a new subject if you wish. I see that it's, unless my eyes are wrong, that it's noon. So if you wish, I will break here. Otherwise, I'm going to start a new subject at this time.
The President: Thank you. Since the prosecution is about to turn to a new topic and the time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment, the Chamber will adjourn for lunch from now until 1:30 this afternoon. And before the adjournment, the Chamber wishes to ask the witness, Mr. Sarun. Do you think that you are fit enough to testify before us this afternoon? If you can do, then we will be able to finish it early so that you can go back home early as well. But it is up to you to decide whether or not you is fit to do so. Response: Mr. President, thank you. My health is good enough. I can do it this afternoon. The President: Court officer is now instructed to facilitate the place for the witness and his duty counsel to rest during lunch break and have them back to this courtroom by 1:30 this afternoon. I note the defense counsel is on his feet. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. My client, Mr. Nuon Chea, would like to follow the proceedings this afternoon from the holding cell, and we have prepared the waiver as usual.
The President: Having noted the request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his counsel that he follows the proceeding by remote means from the holding cell, and he has expressly waived his right to be present directly in this courtroom. The Chamber grants that request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his defense counsel, so he may follow the proceeding from the holding cell downstairs, where the audio-visual equipment is linked for him to follow the proceeding for the remainder of the proceeding today. The Chamber requires that the defense team for Nguyen Chia submit to the Chamber the waiver of Mr. Nguyen Chia together with his thumbprint or signature. And AV assistant, please ensure that the audio-visual equipment is linked to the holding cell downstairs so that the accused Nguyen Chia can follow the proceeding for the remainder of today's proceedings. And security guards are instructed to bring Mr. Nguyen Chia and Mr. Kieu Sampon to the holding cell downstairs. And Mr. Nguyen Chia is to remain in the holding cell for the remainder of the proceedings today. And Mr. Kieu Sampon shall be brought to this courtroom before 1:30 this afternoon. The court is now adjourned.
សូមជើញក្រោមឈរ